I'm an interviewer, if you're the interviewer, what are some of the things that strike you that would make me stand out as a candidate to you?
Yes. I would say that there are soft and hard skills that would make you stand out to me that I would be looking for distinctly. First of all, a person who's an innovator, someone who is creative and thinks a little bit differently, does, as you were mentioning before, it doesn't just say yes to everything, but actually does reflect and give it consideration and think. So someone who's going to complement the team in a creative way and going to drive the organization forward toward change.
Yeah.
I would say definitely a positive person, an optimistic person, but someone who's excited to come to work every single day and excited to do their job and passionate about it. And that can be conveyed in a number of ways. Right. And I would also say that on the soft skill end, a person who's highly reliable and diligent and shows that in their practice, shows that reliability in everything they've done and how they've undertaken specific accomplishments and how they've been able to undertake certain responsibilities and have finished projects, finished what they've started out to do. So I think that's incredibly important. The other thing would be the hard skills that I was mentioning. I think the hard skills are incredibly important. So what do they learn in their dentistry? What do they know about the practice? And naturally, the technical aspects of it.
Sure.
They've really mastered certain aspects of, because you can teach to an extent. You can teach those hard skills. However, it can take a very long time, and of course, time is money, obviously, so you want to be a little bit careful about, bringing on someone who seems a little bit nebulous in that area. So really being
Sure.
solid and making sure you perfect your skills along the way and take them seriously.
Okay. Yeah. So sometimes when a student is applying to a program, be it a residency or specialty program, they interview in a group setting. So there can be an occasion where I'm being interviewed and there are 3, 4, 5 people in the room who are interviewing me together. Mm-hmm. How do I handle that?
Well, it's very good to know that in advance, if you can know that in advance. Sometimes an interviewer will mention that it's a panel interview. So really great to ask that question of, will I be interviewing just with you, or will it be a panel setting? Just curious about how the interview will be set up. So I don't think there's anything really, anything offensive to maybe ask in advance what the interview might entail, so you kind of know and you can prepare. Okay. So I think that will give you at least a lead into knowing how you can address specific questions that are asked. And I would say one of the most important things is that if it's a panel interview, say you have 3 or more interviewers, or you have 4 or 5 candidates, job candidates that are also vying for the position, make sure that you give everyone eye contact. I would say just looking at the interviewer probably isn't the best thing, but actually interacting with the other interview applicants if you can.
Okay.
So making it a dynamic enough setting so that you're giving everyone that acknowledgement. And I think the other thing is that you want to make sure that you've allowed the other interview applicants their time as well, and what you're going to say is really important because you've done your homework and preparation in advance. So if you've actually been able to research the company, you might have to speak a little bit more succinctly to get your point across, because you'll be kind of vying for time with those other candidates. Make sure that your strongest points get heard. Your track record of success, again, some of those stats and how you've accomplished things. So you might have less time, but you can make that even more meaningful.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It makes sense. And I guess in dentistry what we see more than being in the room with other applicants is I'm the only applicant, but there are 4 or 5 people who are part of the hospital who are asking me personally the questions all at one
time. Okay, so you're saying a panel interview of employers there.
Exactly.
Okay, yes,
exactly.
Yes. You're going to really want to, again, look at the person who's asking the question, but also acknowledge the other people. So I think part of it is body language. Look at how you're conveying yourself during the interview. If there's someone who makes you uncomfortable in the room, it maybe seems a little standoffish or what have you, still give that person equal floor time. So make sure that you're dividing your attention appropriately and that you're honoring each person. And so I would say that's one thing that we mentioned with the other side of the equation as well. But the other thing you're going to want to do is make sure that you've thoroughly answered the question. And whenever they're asking questions, because they can field various questions at you pretty quickly, right, you want to make sure that you really heard the question in advance, that you're answering what has been asked. So even if you rephrase the question and say, I just want to make sure that I've understood the question correctly, you want to make sure you're answering what they're asking, because sometimes you may think you understand, but if you haven't paraphrased and asked that back, you might not completely, you might be going off on a tangent or in the wrong direction, and then they'll need to clarify with you. So you want to make their time, in your time, the most meaningful.
Okay.
By really listening to the questions asked, by making sure that the other thing is that you've thanked each person at the end. I mean, it's very simple, but you've given them a strong handshake and really given them that eye contact, and that you've gotten their business cards. We mentioned that. Trying to think if there was anything else that I haven't. I know there's more to it. I know there's got to be something else. Is there anything else that?
There's one concept that I hear you talking about with everything that you're saying, that I think if I could verbalize it, it would be, so we're building relationships, we're drawing on emotion, we're bringing in this whole technical component also. One of the things that we do in our office all day with our patients to help build that relationship, knowing that most communication is nonverbal, is we often try to pose ourselves and maybe mirror
we talked
the interviewer.
about that earlier. Yes, that's right. So mirror the interviewer and their actions. I think it's very important to look at their voice tone, and that's one of the interviewing techniques that a lot of interview coaches suggest. If they're talking really softly and methodically, or deliberately, you might want to do the same. So, when you parrot or, mirror someone's body language that is disarming and makes them feel very comfortable, and you feel like you've built up a rapport and compatibility. So look at those aspects of the interviewers. Now, if you have multiple interviewers in an interview, to all of a sudden, talk in an accelerated way, and then it might be a little bit more difficult. It might seem a little schizophrenic if you do it that way.
Yeah.
But still, leaning in, making sure that you have really given them your undivided attention and time is incredibly important. I would say not to feel intimidated by their questions necessarily. Sometimes people will say, well, I felt a little beaten up afterwards, after that interview, but recognize their questions are necessary for them to get the information they need to determine your level of candidacy. So even if they ask questions that are hardball questions, you want to be prepared, and you want to make sure that you're not offended by or feeling uncomfortable, because again, that's just how they determine your abilities.
That's interesting you bring that up, because when you say the hardball question, I think of the interviewer who throws you the curveball.
Yes.
What is the function of that curveball question, and how do you deal with it?
Yeah. A number of different possibilities. One could be that they want to see how quickly you can think on your feet. They want to see how you can field certain questions in the moment and respond to them with aplomb and with a level of ease. So they want to see your level of anxiety possibly. So it could be just, one of their tactics to put you on the hot seat and kind of apply the pressure a little bit. But it also could be that they are thinking of something new that they haven't thought of before during the interview, and they just want to interject something. Okay. Or they want to see how creative you can be in the moment and how you can kind of pioneer something new. They could be trying to get any number of different things out of you, and sometimes it's hard to judge in the moment. Might want to think they want to see how you think creatively and critically. I think the critical aspect of it is as well. Your analytical skills could be a possibility.
Okay.
So.
It's interesting. Sometimes I would like to tell you that all dentists are really nice and they ask you genuine things, but sometimes I think it's just their way of showing that they're in charge of the room. Is it okay if you're if you're really in tune and you're picking up that vibe, is it all right to kind of take a deep breath and not be exasperated, but to question the question? Or is that not something to do?
I would say that you don't want to appear, there's a line, there's a really delicate dance that occurs during an interview. You don't want to appear like a pushover, and you don't want to appear like you are subservient and being subjugated during the interview, but you also, if they ask an inappropriate question, an unethical question, naturally, you're going to want to decline to answer that. Okay? So, it depends on what the question is. If it really violates your personal code of ethics, then you may not want to go there. And you may want to ask them, can you justify why you're asking this question? What's the reason behind that? Just so I understand a little bit more. I'm happy to answer it, if it's justifiable, but I need to know your line of reasoning.
Okay.
So there's nothing wrong with asking them. If you feel that it really comes up against your moral foundation, your code of ethics, that would be the question I would say. But if it's a question that just feels a little uncomfortable or unnerving, I think you probably should be answering the
Just try
question
and
to the
answer.
best of your ability,
Okay.
and recognize that they're giving you the job. You have to come at it from the what can I do for you perspective. I still feel they're in the driver's seat.
Okay.
Is that a terrible thing for me to say?
No,
I'm just
I think
curious.
that's an honest thing to say. I was asked in one of my interviews for my residency if I could pick to be any cell, one cell in the human body, what cell would I be?
Yes.
And I just found that to be the most
Yes.
bizarre, alarming, and interesting
Yes,
question
I've
somebody
asked
could
him,
ask me.
if you were the spice of a spice rack, what spice would you be?
Yeah.
And various questions and mathematical equations. Sometimes they may test your intellect or aptitude. So a bunch of different questions they can field at you, and all are fair game and fair practice. And I think that it's just important to do the very best you possibly can. Prepare, recognize that some, curveball questions, as you said, may be fielded in the moment, and be prepared to respond as best as you can. Just keep your head about you, keep your
Yeah.
head attached to your body.
That's a good point. I mean,
Yeah.
expect the unexpected, and when it happens, you'll have some process that you can work your brain through and
Yeah.
wrap your head around it.
Yeah.
Great.
And try to have fun. Try to enjoy it as much as you possibly can. It may not always be an enjoyable experience, but if you can add, a small dose of humor throughout, I think it will show that you're a good sport during the process as well.
No.